All right, 25 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. And it is time for the program called Legally Yours. This is your show, and it's an opportunity for you to get your legal questions answered by attorney John B. Fuller. He's in the studio right now, and today is Wednesday, November 13th, 2013. I tell you the date so you know that it's a live show. If that's the date where you are, then you're listening to a live show. And, of course, John is here to answer your questions, so you'll need the phone number, and that is 622-WOCA. That's the WOCA Climate Control Source Hotline, 622-9622. And, of course, John is with the law firm of Fuller & Fuller right here in Ocala. The other Fuller is his beautiful wife, Janet, who we don't ever see anymore. Good morning, John. How you doing?
Good morning. Yes, Janet's at our village office usually on Wednesdays, so it's difficult for her to be here. She specializes in Social Security disability, and if any of our listeners have a question or think they may qualify or they've been turned down for benefits and they're unable to work, well, then we're very happy to have them call Janet. She knows that area of the law and would be very pleased to talk with any of our listeners who may have a claim for Social Security disability benefits because they're unable to be employed.
Is that going to tie into the health care laws?
Well, that's a good question, and I really don't know at this point. I don't think so that it does, because Social Security disability provides health benefits and a stipend of money based upon how much you've paid into the system on your earnings throughout your work career. But it is a highly specialized area of the law, and it is an area of the law that I do not practice in, so I always defer any and all questions to Janet at the office. But anyway, before we get started or have calls or anything, I always do this every year. We didn't do it last Wednesday, and we missed Veterans Day. And because our legal system is fundamental to our system of our way of life, our system of government. It's a system that may not be perfect, but it is certainly proven to be better than any other system that has ever been devised, and it would not exist. I am sure beyond a doubt that if our country was not secure in the principles guaranteed in the Constitution and enforced by the judicial branch of our government, that there would be a tyrant that would try to run the country. That's what's happened in other countries. That's what caused our founding fathers to leave the distant shores where we came from to come to this country to start a new way of life where the people would be in charge. And in order to preserve that, and I know it's a cliche and I know it's overused, but freedom isn't free. It is purchased with the sacrifice of our men and women in the armed services who are serving now, and to those who have served our country in other wars. And November 11th, which is now Veterans Day, initially was called Armistice Day because it was the date that the armistice or ceasefire was signed at 11 a.m. To stop the hostilities of World War I. And so it's a very, very important date, and I want to acknowledge it, and I want to say a personal thank you from all the members of our law firm and our families to anyone who has served our country in the armed forces.
And do the just as they have the VA, is there a veterans service specifically for legal needs?
I don't know, to be honest with you, Larry. I'm not an expert on veteran affairs or veteran benefits. They have, I know that they certainly have VA medical benefits, but I've never had occasion. I obviously am not associated or affiliated with any veteran groups in providing legal services, and I don't know that they do. I'm not aware of it, but certainly anyone who has served, they would have the appropriate contact information online to go to look up and see what veteran benefits might be available.
Are you familiar with the? I'm doing this kind of in the dark because on the Thursday show, the Veterans Show, they sometimes speak about the Veterans Court with Judge McCune. I guess it's giving veterans like a second chance or a kind of an opportunity to maybe get out of a harsh situation.
Yeah, I don't know any of the details about that. I know that they look. The courts have been quite creative. They have a teen court where they try to look for some alternate dispute resolution and punishment if it's a criminal matter that's of a nonviolent nature that seeks to get to the root of the problem. If the person has emotional issues, anger management issues that may in some way be related, they may take that into consideration. If there are substance abuse issues, they may try to, rather than just punish it as a punitive matter, they may look to see about some treatment programs and that sort of thing.
Right.
But again, I don't have specifics on anything like that. Wasn't anticipating any detailed issues about something like that. But certainly from the big picture, Veterans Day was on a Monday this week. We have this show on a Wednesday. It has been my practice for the 2 years that we've been fortunate to have this show and the good listeners that we have to make certain that I do not let either the week before or the week after, as close as I can to November 11th, to take a moment of our airtime to acknowledge these folks, both the ones who are living and those who have given their lives to the country or those who have just passed on. I see where we're down to very few World War II veterans still living, and they have 3 of the original Doolittle Raiders living. Did you see that?
No.
Jimmy Doolittle, who flew the Doolittle Raid over Tokyo in 1942, taking land-based B-25 Mitchell bombers off of Navy carriers and bombing Tokyo and overflying Japan into China. He formed a club of all the surviving crew members, and he bought a bottle of cognac that was bottled in 1896, which was Jimmy Doolittle's birth date. And each year on the anniversary of the Doolittle Raid, which was, I believe, yesterday or day before yesterday, or maybe they just did it on Veterans Day, all of the survivors would get together, and he had silver chalices engraved with each member's name written when you look at the glass sitting up, it had their name so you could read it, and then it had their name written upside down on it.
Oh, wow.
And they would all join together and drink a toast to those comrades who were no longer with them, and the members of the Doolittle Raid that had either died in the raid or who subsequently expired just from either their wounds, injuries, or just old age.
Right.
They turned their cup, their chalice, upside down, and that way you would still be able to read their name.
Oh, wow.
And they have 3 survivors. One was too infirm to make it. They're 98, 95, and 96. So the 2 that were able to get together to drink the toast, they decided that this would be the last one of the Doolittle reunions.
Oh, wow, really?
But it was a very, very big morale booster for this country. The Japanese thought they were impregnable. They had vowed that Tokyo would never be bombed. Pearl Harbor, of course, had been completely decimated by the attack on December 7th, and we had we had lost Wake and Guam, the Philippines. The British had lost the base in Singapore. We had no air bases where our bombers were within range, and trying to get what remained of the 3 carriers that we had left after Pearl Harbor close enough to let the short-range carrier planes go bomb would have invited destruction of the last remnants of our surface fleet of the Navy. So Doolittle, who was quite an innovative person in aviation, and went on to be the founder of Eastern Airlines after the war. But in any event, Doolittle put together this raid where he was able to train the pilots and customize the Mitchell B-25 twin engine. That's the twin tail bomber with two engines, to be able to take off of a carrier deck, which was shorter than 3 football fields.
Wow.
And it was quite a feat. And then they didn't have enough fuel and they couldn't land on the carrier, so they had to go on to China and hope to be rescued by the Chinese nationals who were fighting Japan and China. So it was quite a thing. They pulled it off. They bombed downtown Tokyo. The amount of actual physical damage was rather modest, but the psychological impact of seeing the American bombers over Tokyo in broad daylight, and of course they didn't have radar or anything like that, was quite an accomplishment and was a huge morale boost for the United States of America, who were in the depths of despair. And when President Roosevelt was asked at a news conference, and the Japanese were asking the same question, where did those planes come from? Roosevelt answered with a twinkle in the eye, they came from Shangri-La. I don't know what that has to do with Legally Yours, but it ties into Veterans Day.
It's good radio, though.
I think that's give me a chance to tell a story, and I'll probably talk too long.
So you're a history buff, an airplane buff?
I don't know. I think military buff maybe would be a reasonable summary. I really respect at all levels. My own father was a combat veteran of World War I. It's really, we have so much to be grateful for in this country, and it is a very important thing that we be ever vigilant with a strong, capable military to preserve those freedoms.
Yeah, something goes wrong, and the first thing we do is we say, well, we're going to get back at you. Who do you turn to? You turn to those guys serving.
Right. Well, right now, for the first time in a number of years, we're down to a 10 aircraft carrier fleet. We normally have 11, but they have the Gerald Ford was just commissioned, was just launched last week, but will not be completed and outfitted and commissioned for duty until, I believe, 2015, and it'll be our newest nuclear carrier. But they decommissioned one of the fleet carriers that they have, so now we have 10 fleet aircraft carriers instead of 11. So those are usually the first line of response when we need to project American force in the various hotspots around the world.
Yeah, I remember reading about that the other day. You want to start with the phones?
Yes, I'm sorry if I've kept people waiting.
No, I think the call just came in, John. Good morning. You're on the air with John Fuller.
Hey, thanks, Larry. And John, thanks for mentioning the Veterans Day recognition, and thank you for sharing with the audience that your father served in World War I. My wife's grandfather, Duncan, is buried in Miami. He also served in World War I, was an infantryman. He came back with a 45 from the war, and when I met him in 1981 in Miami, he said, "Son, let me show you something." And he was an older man at that time, and he came back to the living room there, and he showed me the 45, and I said, "Well, Grandpa Duncan, let me show you something." And I reached down on my ankle, and I had a Combat Commander 45 in an ankle holster on my Tony Lama cowboy boots as a rookie cop in Miami. I found that to be a great backup weapon.
That's marvelous.
The 45, even though I would just share with John, I served on U.S. Embassy duty, and a couple of the Marines I served with went on to become lawyers. One of them, Bob Miller, made a career out of the Marine Corps as a JAG officer. And I have another friend that I served with on embassy duty, just retired from the FBI. So Marines sit around and do a lot of communicating, whether on embassy duty or in any situation. Matter of fact, our soldiers do a lot of talking to each other because they have a lot of what they call downtime. And we come to a lot of conclusions about political things or our country, and find out about our own lives and why we did serve. But I would just make one comment about John's observation with the aircraft carriers, not to cut him off, is what they did share in the news yesterday, and it's no surprise to John, I'm sure, even though the number of aircraft carriers has dropped by carrier task forces. I don't know if the whole task force, but the technology and the range has increased. I also share with John, if he's not aware, they are planning on moving a division of U.S. Marines and their support Air Force element and naval personnel out of Okinawa, not because they want to give the Okinawans places to build Hyatt hotels, but in fact, what I've read from a military standpoint is they want to get them out of the range of long-range missiles that the North Koreans possess, and they're moving them to Guam. And actually, this current administration has a delegation of the Marine detachment, freestanding detachment, now in Australia. We're getting just showing existence in what's called the Pacific Rim. But anyway, I just thought I'd share that with the listeners. And a division, whether it's I know John knows this, but a division, whether it's the Russian Army, a Chinese Army, or American Army, is about 30,000 Americans, or 30,000 people, period. So those are the numbers. But John, I'll hang up and leave you with a thank you, and I appreciate you mentioning. I like the fact you know your stuff, and I looked that lawyer up. And I'm a big fan of his. Is that Jerry Spence? I think you mentioned when I talked to you about a year ago.
Yep.
What a wonderful lawyer. What a neat man.
Jerry Spence, and the other gentleman who you might care to look up, who I have been fortunate to try a number of cases with, and who is a close personal friend and mentor of mine, is Bobby Lee Cook, who they made the TV show Matlock after. And Bobby Lee is one of the real deals. And he's 86 years old, and he's still trying cases very effectively. Thank you for calling in, and thank you for your service. And let me just say, I hope you were able to get your granddad's World War I 45. That is a wonderful weapon. It was designed by John Moses Browning really in 1909, and he perfected it in 1911, and then they modified it shortly thereafter with the 1911 A1, and it served the American military very, very capably for almost 100 years. But when America got into NATO, they needed to have unified ammunition, so they went to a 9mm, and they had competition, and it was a tie between Sig Sauer and the Beretta company, and the Berettas were cheaper, so the military went from the 1911, which your granddad had and which you had the shorter version of when you were a law enforcement officer in Miami, concealed in an angle holster. It continues to be the weapon of choice, even though the military officially adopted the M9 Beretta, which is a Beretta Model 92. The 45 Colt and its different iterations, whether made by Kimber or Springfield Armory or a number of other providers, it has made a huge comeback, and it is used now by the FBI, by the hostage rescue team. It is used by Special Forces operatives because there's just something really special about a 45 round in terms of its effectiveness at stopping hostilities. And so I hope you kept your grandfather's World War I 1911. That would be quite a thing to have.
John, if I could just say, his son is a World War II veteran and is in possession of that weapon as we speak. I'll just make one final note about the Philippines and the storm and the U.S. Marine Corps. The Americans are already on the ground. The U.S. Marines are in the Philippines, and they are primarily using Marines like myself, which were the combat engineers, which incorporate heavy equipment, electricity, and water purification units within them, and also construction combat engineers, which is what I was, to clear the runway and to set up potable water for folks. And it's going to take a little time, but I would share from a soldier standpoint that when we as Americans go somewhere to help anyone, that the Abu Sayyaf does operate in the Philippines, which is their version of the Al Qaeda. So when we go to help folks, we're actually pushing back against that without firing a shot. So public relations, by devotion to peaceful means, can bring out peaceful results.
Very, very good point, and thank you for mentioning it. Thank you for calling in. Thank you again for your service, and certainly our hearts go out to the people of the Philippines who were devastated by that typhoon, and it's a real tragedy.
The phone line is open if anybody else would like to call John. The number is 622-WOCA, and he'll be answering questions for a few more minutes, or you can call him at his office.
Right. And let me just point out, we've been on some broad topics, and I think that's fine, and I've enjoyed the conversation and the opportunity to use this time, but to thank veterans and to talk about some of those things. But on a more practical note, the system that they fought and died to preserve, I want folks to know that if they're in an automobile accident, or if they're hurt, if they're injured by a defective product, or someone maintaining a negligent premises, the system is in place. It's not, there's no magic touch to make someone who's lost a limb have a new limb, but we do have a system of compensating people to try to make them whole monetarily. And if you've been in an accident, you have certain rights, and if you have questions, don't hesitate to call us at the office. Yes, sir. Have a call?
Yes, sir, you do. Good morning. You're on the air with John.
Good morning, John.
Hey, how are you, sir?
Pretty good, and you?
I'm great, thank you.
Well, that's good. I have a question, and I'm really glad that you did mention aspects of the military and things that have occurred in this country to preserve many of the freedoms that we have and observe nowadays. And my question is this. I noticed a while back there was a big, battle between the sheriff and the county commissioners in regards to founding. And I said to myself, the Vets Helping Vets have formed a group, and they're trying to do some mentoring for those people that find themselves with criminal problems, so that they won't have to spend, a whole lot of time in jail, for just little minor things. And I thought, wow, now's an opportunity for the sheriff department, maybe the school board, and the other municipalities and the county commission to get together and really begin to address the issue of warehousing people in the jails. And because of the lack of resources and the lack of funds, and I thought that was a real missed opportunity, to sort of decrease that revolving door. And so my question is, in spite of all of the things that have been done to preserve many of the rights and stuff, it still seems like when it comes to rehabilitating those that have served in the military and other things, we still have a problem in this country in regards to sort of rehabilitating people rather than just punishing, especially when they don't have the resources available that many other people have. And I'm concerned with your opinion in regards to whether or not we're really doing enough to rehabilitate people that have done things to allow us to have the freedoms that we have. I'll hang up and listen, and I'm talking about basically certainly from a legal perspective. That's why I'm so work for legal services and things like that. I'll hang up and listen to your response. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to be brief because I think I'm just about out of time for today's show, and that was a very good question, and I appreciate you calling in. I think I agree with you totally. I think statistics have shown this country is spending a vast disproportionate amount of its resources warehousing people for nonviolent criminal offenses. I think they are solutions to it. I think it is going to require, it's not going to require massive changes in the law. We have options, but the choices that are made by the people who administer the programs sometimes are at variance with your sentiment. And I'll give you a quick example. For certain nonviolent crimes for first offenders, there is a statutory procedure in criminal law known as pretrial intervention. And if you enter into that contract, there's a charge pending against you, you have to admit you're guilty. And if you then go into the pre-TI program, you have to do certain conditions, kind of like probation. And if you do that, after a period of time, the charge will be dismissed. That's a good program, and we have that here locally. There is another program that has been adopted in Gainesville, for instance, by the state attorney in the 8th Judicial Circuit called deferred prosecution. And it is a separate contract, and it does not require the individual who's been arrested to admit guilt. And this is very important because the admission of guilt for a large sector of our society can disenfranchise them from their licenses, their permits.
Wow.
Let's say it's a medical doctor who gets involved with something, and he's never had any other problems. There's no reason to believe he would have anything whatsoever, but for whatever reason, they don't want to dismiss the charge. If he is elected, if he goes into a pretrial intervention program, it would jeopardize his Medicare reimbursable rates, his insurance reimbursable rates, his privileges to work at a local hospital, because he would have to admit guilt to the underlying offense, even though he wasn't adjudicated guilty.
Wow.
That's a huge element that takes that whole program away from a lot of people who have so much more to lose. Familiar with the case where they would not allow a deferred prosecution where the individual did not have to admit guilt, and the individual could not go through the pretrial intervention program because to admit guilt would cost him his livelihood. Okay?
Yeah, right.
So he did what every citizen in this country does. He's presumed innocent. He's entitled to have the state attorney prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. He pled not guilty, had a trial, and I think the jury was out something around 20 minutes and found him not guilty. And
wow.
and that took a day of a prosecutor to do it. It took the 6 Marion County jurors that were paid to hear that case. It took the courtroom bailiff. It took the clerk. It took the judge. A full day of trial. I don't know what the cost to Marion County was, but if that same case was in other jurisdictions, and I'm not criticizing anybody, this is a judgment call that the elected official is absolutely entitled to make that decision, and I respect it, and I understand their reasons for it, but I'm suggesting that inconsistent with what our caller just said, what are some alternatives? That's one alternative that would avoid that, and it's not appropriate in all cases. You don't want it in violent cases. You don't want it in cases where there are repeat offenses, etc. But it is there. But it's a complex question, and there aren't simple answers to it. And we just need to keep our options open.
Wow, always impressed with you, John. How do we get a hold of you? What's your number?
Our office number is 352-547-4292. Our toll-free number is 855-534-8255. 888-878-2565. We have offices in Ocala and the Villages. If you've been in an accident, have a civil dispute or Social Security disability claim, or would like to talk with us about a complex family law matter, please give us a call.
All right. Thank you so much, John. We will take a little break and be right back.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA. Ocala.
ABC News Now. I'm Karen Chase. No, you didn't sleep through the entire month of November. The weather only feels like December or January. The Arctic air has arrived early along the East Coast and the Deep South. Snow is a problem in the Midwest. Warmer weather is due Friday. Concern is growing in the Philippines, where frustrated